The third and final category of the debate is looking at the differences between the candidates' platforms. And then we'll take some questions from the audience. First question I have is that you have both stated a goal to make byline funding more objective. How will you execute the shared goal better than your opponent?
So this upcoming year pre-elected to the Assembly will be my third byline funding cycle, and I can tell you that absolutely every cycle thus far we have had a huge problem with subjectivity, particularly in the appeals process. So what I would like to see going forward is a much more transparent process. Now, the process for the rules and regulations for eligibility and then going through that process are pretty well defined at this point, and the current Assembly will actually have primary jurisdiction over those rules. However, I do think that next year going forward, or really in our organizational period, once the new cabinet is in, we really need to sit down, particularly with the Vice President of Finance and the rest of our executive board, and really come up with a standard set of criteria through which we will evaluate appeals, because I think that has not been very well established yet. People will a lot of times say, and members from CAPSU will likely agree, that when they came in for their appeal, a lot of them felt like the essay had already predetermined that outcome. And that really wasn't right, and in many ways I agree with them. And there was whole talks of we don't want to appear racist and things of that nature. So we really need a standard set of criteria. We need to make sure that that is very clear to the student body, that these are the things that we are looking for, and that's what I want to see.
So for the last 2 years, I've been on the Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for the byline funding decisions. That was my first byline funding cycle, and this will be my second. I think I've learned so much about that experience, being a part of the actual funding decision. I think, being on the outside of that committee and just seeing the decisions that come through on a piece of paper really doesn't actually tap into the weight of those decisions, and being in that room and hearing appeals and hearing presentations from each of those byline funding organizations, understanding the culture and the operations of them. I think that's something that's invaluable, because as a president, I will understand when those organizations approach us if they're not happy with the Appropriations Committee decision, or if they are happy, I will understand that because I have that relevant experience. In terms of actually creating objective protocol, I think that's huge. And I was on the committee when we were dealing with CAPSU, and it was huge because it's a cultural organization, but at the same time, it impacted so many students on campus. Asia Night, for example, attracts 650 students. So it was a huge decision that we had to make as well. So in terms of actually creating that objective protocol, I think it's not just about sitting down with the members of the executive board and all the VPs, because I want to create transparency between the assembly members and the executive board, which is something that I think is sorely lacking. So I actually want to sit down with every member of the student assembly and figure out what it means to be a byline funding organization, so we can move forward as a collective assembly during that byline funding process.
Can you guys both take 30 seconds to answer why you think you would improve byline funding more than your opponent, or better than your opponent?
So I'd say number one, the fact that I've been on the Appropriations Committee for 2 years, especially during a byline funding season, I think that's invaluable. Number two, I've been a member of a few SAO organizations who are part of Alana, which is a byline funding organization, so I have that experience as well. And then number three, I think I bring so many different experiences to the table based on my experiences at Cornell, and then my life experiences that would better serve externally and internally the student assembly. So that's how I improve relative to my opponent. I just think I have the relevant experience that could really get us through that time next year during byline funding.
Talk about relevant experience. I mean, again, this is my third byline funding cycle that I'll be going into. And though I may not have served on the Appropriations Committee, I've definitely dealt with the repercussions of the decisions that committee has made, and really tried to comfort and console a lot of students when it comes to the decisions that were made. And I've been exactly on the other side of that, as in taking part in a lot of the student organizations that have gone through the trials and tribulations, that hellish process of applying for funding and then going through that process. So I think that's a totally relevant experience, because while you're sitting there making that decision, we're on the other side suffering.
This question is for Ulysses. Stephen today and over the past week has said that his most important concerns of this platform are creating more late-night safety initiatives, making it easier to obtain SAFC funding, and to bridge the structural gap that separates students. What do you think are the difficulties associated with implementing this kind of platform?
I think one, he is choosing topics that are trendy at this point in time, and has not really taken the time to really evaluate what a lot of students are feeling. And We've been talking about these same topics for like maybe 2 to 3 years at this point in time, and we've also, and it's very easy to choose these topics because the past 2 assemblies have made such great strides in addressing those particular issues. Is there work to be done? Sure, but are these the three main things that should be attacked? Not totally. My platform is highly different from that, and if you look at it, you don't see a lot of like, I want to tackle blah 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 specifically in this and this, because that's not the job of the president, is not to go in with this set agenda. I want the assembly members to come up with their agendas. I want to make sure that we as an executive board are really ensuring that assembly members are really attacking, not attacking, but really going through and taking advantage of those initiatives and really enforcing them and making sure that they come to fruition. Additionally, you know, this has been an interesting process for me because I'm not used to really campaigning and feeling like I'm selling myself to people. I'd much rather be on the ground, just really engaging and talking to people, and that's what I think this assembly has been lacking for the past few years. And that's where our priorities differ. Because my priority is not bringing in my own set agenda. My priority is prioritizing students and making sure that we're really getting their voices heard.
Stephen, you have 30 seconds to respond before I ask you a question about Ulysses' platform.
You know, I want to point out the fact that the issues I chose are issues because they're important. The reason why we're talking about them 2 or 3 years after we've begun to work on them and make progress is because they're still issues. It's not because they're trendy, it's because they can actually benefit every single student on campus. Every single Cornellian has the right to a safe walk home. And there are many people who are still upset with this tiered structure of the SAFC. It's not something that I choose because it's trendy and I think appeals to you, but because it's something I actually want to get done. And I want to take advantage of the fact that, you know, I'll have the opportunity on my one last year to get and see initiatives through, but also interact with you guys as well.
Stephen, the Ulysses platform states that he will change the structure of the SA committees, have the SA become more involved in academic and university funding decisions, and make the SA members more accountable. What difficulties do you think he would face in implementing this platform?
Sure, I have a minute now?
A minute and a half, yeah.
Sure. You know, I think when you look at the student assembly, every resolution that we have comes through a committee, but not every initiative. And the power of the student assembly is the combination of both, and not just one another. So I think the difficulty in reorganizing committees at the end of the day is you're going to see a lot of the internal legislation that we've seen this entire past year. There's no impact that actually impacts all 14,000 students, but instead it just impacts the 27 members of our student assembly. So I think that's a huge difficulty and probably should be redirected as well. You know, in terms of funding decision, I absolutely agree. Byline funding is going to be huge, and I think I want to tackle finance for the SAFC. And you know, in terms of difficulty, I think it's going to be about the education and actually, you know, creating that buy-in through students to see if, you know, the SAFC should be changed, and then also creating that objective protocol with the rest of the SA members on what a byline funded organization actually is. And in terms of accountability, I think that's really instituting protocol like through the executive vice president and the VP of IOPS. But I think when you're looking for a president, you're going to be looking for someone who can relate to each and every single member of the SA. And I ask you guys, you know, to really, you know, look at each of us and see who would do a better job on a personal level in motivating the SA members next year.
Ulysses, you have 30 seconds.
Sure. I think it's interesting that you bring up that not every initiative goes through an SA committee, but in fact, that is what our bylaws say. That's what it says is supposed to happen, because if an initiative goes through a committee, then you get even more student input from it. It gets a second look. You get a more informed. You create a more informed policy. And I agree. I do think I'm going to hold true on that and hold firm on that. We really do need to create more accountability for our members. You can't get elected and then not do your job. It's not right. It's not fair. So that translates not only for members but also to executive board members. So if you enact, I don't know, a PR strategy, then let's make sure you actually are following that and doing your job.